The summer of 1974 found an elderly man in Darmstadt, West Germany, sitting alone with a book that would shatter the last of his carefully constructed beliefs. Admiral Dönitz, the last leader of Nazi Germany and former commander of its entire submarine fleet, held open page 117 of a memoir that had only recently appeared in German bookstores. The volume was marked as ultra-secret, explosive in its revelations. His aged hands trembled as they gripped the paper edges, his eyes working slowly through the English text that an aide had begun translating for him, line by line. The words on the page revealed truths that contradicted 3 decades of what he thought he knew. For nearly 30 years since the war's end, he had clung to one narrative. The Allies had possessed superior radar, greater resources, and technological advantages that made his submarine forces' destruction inevitable. But here, in black and white, lay a different story entirely. From May 1940 forward, the text stated plainly, the British had been reading German naval and air force traffic nearly as quickly as the Germans themselves transmitted it. At 83 years old, Dönitz sat in stunned silence as the meaning of those words began to settle over him like a heavy fog. According to his aide, who witnessed the moment, all color drained from the Admiral's weathered face. The magnitude of what he was reading seemed to physically strike him. Every order he had transmitted to his U-boats, every tactical innovation he had devised, every desperate maneuver he had orchestrated to win the Battle of the Atlantic, all of it had been visible to British intelligence, often read by enemy codebreakers before his own commanders even received the messages. The harbored suspicions remained dormant in his mind. I had always suspected something, Dönitz would write in a hurried letter to the book's publisher just days later. But those words sounded hollow even as he composed them, and anyone who had known him during the war years would have recognized the defensive posturing in that admission. Throughout the conflict, whenever his subordinates had raised concerns about security, Dönitz had dismissed them with absolute unwavering certainty. The Enigma machine could not be broken. That had been his conviction, his rock-solid foundation. Now, sitting in his modest apartment in Achmühle near Hamburg, surrounded by the accumulated silence of his retirement years, the full weight of the deception crushed down upon him. 783 submarines lost to the depths. 30,000 of his men, lay dead beneath the Atlantic waters, their final resting place the cold ocean floor. And every single loss traced back to one brutal truth. The encryption system he had trusted with unwavering faith, the system he had championed and defended, had been systematically compromised since the war's 3rd year. The mathematics upon which German confidence had rested, the theoretical protections that were supposed to be unbreakable, had meant nothing in the face of Polish mathematicians, British cryptanalysts, and primitive computing machines of a type Dönitz never even knew existed. Enigma, the machine that German military leadership believed represented the pinnacle of cryptographic technology, had been designed around calculations that seemed absolutely unassailable. The standard 3-rotor Wehrmacht Enigma offered 17,576 possible rotor positions, and these could be multiplied by 60 different rotor arrangements, creating a total of over 1 million primary configurations. But when the plugboard connections were factored into the equation, connections with their 150 trillion, 738 billion, 274 million, 937,250 possible combinations, the total number of configurations reached an astronomical figure, 158 trillion, 962 billion, 555 million, 217 billion, 826 million, 360,000 possible settings. Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, who had headed the OKW Chiffrierstelle, the Wehrmacht's cipher department, understood in theory that Enigma might be vulnerable to mathematical analysis. As he would later tell Allied interrogators during post-war investigations in 1945, he had found it impossible to imagine anyone possessing either the resources or the determination to undertake such an immense effort. This was not mere arrogance, though it may have appeared that way to outsiders. Rather, it represented a carefully calculated assessment based on the technology and resources known to exist during the 1930s and early 1940s. To test every possible Enigma setting by brute force would have required, by German calculations, teams of trained cryptanalysts working continuously for time periods that exceeded the actual age of the universe itself. Even if the Allies managed to capture one of their machines without access to the daily changing keys that were carefully distributed through meticulously guarded codebooks, they would need to solve each day's settings completely anew, a task German mathematicians had calculated would demand thousands of trained operators working without rest around the clock for years on end. The Kriegsmarine had implemented additional safeguards that seemed at the time to guarantee absolute security against any conceivable threat. Admiral Dönitz had personally instituted the most stringent cryptographic protocols in all the German military. Naval Enigma operators underwent specialized training at the Marine Nachrichtenschule in Flensburg, where they spent months learning not merely the mechanical operation of the devices, but the intricate security procedures that were supposed to render the entire system impregnable and beyond compromise. Codebooks themselves were printed in water-soluble red ink on pink paper that would dissolve completely within 30 seconds of water contact. Weighted bags ensured the materials would sink immediately if cast overboard into the sea. U-boat commanders carried personal sidearms and operated under standing orders to shoot any crew member who failed to destroy all cryptographic materials when capture appeared imminent. The very stakes were life and death. The introduction of the 4-rotor M4 Enigma machine for U-boat operations on February 1, 1942, codenamed Triton by German intelligence and Shark by Allied cryptanalysts, represented what German naval experts considered the ultimate evolution in cryptographic security. With 8 rotors available for selection compared to 5 rotors for other military services, and the 4th rotor adding yet another significant layer of complexity to the equation, the number of possible configurations increased by a multiplicative factor of 26. German cryptanalysts at B-Dienst conducted their own rigorous security assessment, the 100-Tage project, meaning literally the 100-day job, attempting to break their own naval cipher using every known cryptanalytic technique available to them. When all 3 separate attempts failed completely to produce any results, Vice Admiral Erhard Mertens reported back to Dönitz with complete confidence that their cipher appeared to remain unbroken and secure. Throughout 1941 and 1942, however, inexplicable patterns began emerging that should have triggered urgent alarm bells within German naval intelligence. Yet each concerning incident was methodically explained away, attributed to British radar capabilities, superior reconnaissance efforts, or simply bad luck, anything except the possibility that Enigma itself had been fundamentally compromised. These specialized units, expanding to number 40 across the globe, held an iron grip on the distribution of ultra-intelligence. Each officer assigned to an SLU underwent rigorous personal screening by Winterbotham himself, then signed the Official Secrets Act, knowing with absolute certainty that even a whisper of classified information after the war ended would result in execution for treason. The security arrangements at Bletchley Park itself were almost obsessively strict. The sprawling 580-acre estate remained encircled by military police checkpoints, with more than 9,000 workers operating in completely isolated compartments. Codebreakers toiling in Hut 8 on Naval Enigma had zero awareness of what their colleagues in Hut 6 were decoding from military traffic. Even within individual huts, staff members understood only their own narrow assignment. A language specialist might spend years translating German communications into English without ever learning where the intercepts originated or what impact they held. To conceal where ultra-intelligence came from, the British constructed increasingly elaborate cover stories. The primary deception centered on a fabricated spy network codenamed Boniface, supposedly operated by an anti-Nazi German officer positioned in Berlin with access to top-level military communications. When acting on ultra-intelligence, the British routinely launched dummy reconnaissance missions to create believable alternative explanations. After using Ultra to locate an Italian supply convoy headed for North Africa, the British broadcast a message in a German broken cipher, crediting a non-existent spy in Naples for the crucial tip. The most intricate form of deception required balancing which actions to take and which to avoid. The Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center, commanded by Roger Wynne, established strict procedures for deploying ultra-intelligence. Attacks on U-boats were scheduled to happen only after plausible detection methods became available, such as a chance sighting by aircraft or surface contact. Whenever ultra-exposed U-boat refueling meetings, British forces delayed striking until the submarines had remained together long enough that coincidental discovery seemed reasonable. At times, safeguarding ultra meant tolerating devastating losses. On November 14, 1940, German bombers struck Coventry in a terrifying assault that claimed 568 civilian lives. Post-war accounts suggested Churchill had learned from Enigma intercepts that Coventry faced destruction but refused to order evacuation to shield Ultra's existence. Released government records paint a different picture. Enigma decrypts had confirmed Operation Moonlight Sonata was in preparation, though early indications mentioned 5 possible targets. Only when radio direction finding finally pinpointed Coventry as the actual target, mere hours before the attack, did immediate defensive action commence, including fighter patrols and enhanced anti-aircraft positions. The wartime narrative regarding Churchill's cruel choice was itself a carefully constructed post-war fiction designed to protect Ultra's real capabilities and weaknesses. On March 25, 1941, inside Hut 8 at Bletchley Park, a young woman called Mavis Leather, who would later marry and become known as Batty, sat bent over Italian naval intercepts. She had endured punishing 16-hour shifts battling the Italian naval Enigma variant, and suddenly the code revealed its patterns. The intercepted message carried an unmistakable message. Today, March 25th, marks day -3 until the operation begins. Mavis grasped the implications instantly. The Italian Navy was preparing to launch a massive engagement in precisely 72 hours. Through the night, alongside her colleague Margaret Rock, she deciphered additional messages unveiling the Italian fleet's complete battle strategy. Admiral Angelo Iachino would lead the battleship Vittorio Veneto, 6 heavy cruisers and 17 destroyers to strike British convoys sailing between Egypt and Greece. The decoded intelligence reached Admiral Andrew Cunningham, who commanded British Mediterranean forces from Alexandria, within hours. Cunningham, a commanding officer who appreciated the value of appearing relaxed and unsuspecting, deliberately spent March 27th visibly enjoying golf at the Alexandria Sporting Club, guaranteeing Italian intelligence agents would observe the British fleet behaving as though oblivious to danger. That evening, after casually returning aboard his flagship HMS Warspite, he transmitted orders sending the fleet to battle stations. The Italian fleet remained unaware they were sailing straight into a methodically organized trap. British carrier aircraft from HMS Formidable struck first, seriously damaging Vittorio Veneto and paralyzing the heavy cruiser Pola. When Italian cruisers Zara and Fiume moved to defend Pola as darkness fell, they encountered point-blank gunfire from Cunningham's battleships. Within moments, both cruisers plus 2 destroyers suffered total destruction. More than 2,400 Italian sailors perished, including Admiral Carlo Cataneo and commanding officers of all 3 lost vessels. Admiral Iachino survived aboard the damaged Vittorio Veneto, but attributed the calamity to superior British radar and fortunate air reconnaissance. In his subsequent report, he explained, "The enemy's detection of our forces resulted from their advanced aerial reconnaissance capability and radar systems, which enabled them to monitor our movements throughout darkness. The possibility that the British had been systematically reading Italian naval orders never crossed Italian or German minds. The consequences cascaded through Axis naval strategy. Hitler, already doubtful about surface combat after the Graf Spee sinking, regarded Matapan as evidence that British forces completely controlled the Mediterranean. The Italian fleet, which had previously threatened British supply operations, never again pursued significant offensive missions. Yet throughout all this, neither Italy nor Germany comprehended that mathematical decryption, not radar or reconnaissance, had orchestrated their ruin. On May 18, 1941, at 11:30 p.m., the teleprinter in Hut 8 at Bletchley Park sprang to life with an intercepted German naval transmission. Harry Hinsley, merely 21 years old, and a Cambridge mathematics student transformed into cryptanalyst, immediately recognized its gravity. The message from Admiral Günther Lutyens, commanding the battleship Bismarck, announced his departure from Gotenhafen, modern-day Gdynia, for Operation Rheinübung, a mission to attack Atlantic merchant shipping. The Royal Navy Admiralty had been preparing for this prospect for months. Bismarck represented the gravest menace to Atlantic convoys since hostilities commenced. Armed with 8 15-inch guns and sophisticated fire control apparatus, it could obliterate any British cruiser and outsail any battleship capable of matching its firepower. Had Bismarck penetrated the Atlantic shipping lanes, the destruction would have been catastrophic. Yet armed in advance with ultra-intelligence, the Royal Navy possessed time to arrange interception. Admiral John Tovey maneuvered the home fleet into blocking position, while Admiral James Somerville's Force H advanced northward from Gibraltar. The cruisers HMS Norfolk and HMS Suffolk took stations in the Denmark Strait under instructions to shadow the target using their cutting-edge Type 284 radar. Every tactical maneuver had been orchestrated using intercepted German communications. When Bismarck appeared in the Denmark Strait on May 23rd, the British portrayed the sighting as fortunate reconnaissance by HMS Suffolk. In reality, ultra-intelligence had revealed not merely Bismarck's course, but its exact timeline. The subsequent engagement that saw HMS Hood destroyed became a tactical setback the British hadn't anticipated. Yet strategically, the outcome was predetermined. Bismarck now suffered damage, hemorrhaged fuel, and remained under observation by radar-equipped destroyers whose locations were continuously updated through fresh Enigma decrypts. On May 25th, Admiral Lutyens committed a catastrophic blunder. Believing British radar contact had been severed, he transmitted an extended radio transmission to Naval Group West detailing his damage and planned movements. The broadcast extended beyond 30 minutes, ample duration for British direction-finding equipment to calculate his position. More significantly, Bletchley Park decoded the message within hours, exposing that Bismarck aimed for Brest and possessed insufficient fuel for prolonged evasion. The concluding phase unfolded with grim certainty. Catalina flying boats found Bismarck precisely where ultra-intelligence had positioned it. Swordfish torpedo aircraft from HMS Ark Royal, pushing the boundaries of their operating range through appalling weather, miraculously delivered the strike that immobilized Bismarck's rudder. At dawn on May 27th, converging British battleships HMS King George V and HMS Rodney reduced Bismarck to wreckage. From the 2,221 German sailors present, merely 114 escaped alive. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, commanding the Kriegsmarine, examined the catastrophe with mounting bewilderment. How had the British preserved contact spanning thousands of miles of ocean? How had they assembled overwhelming firepower at precisely the needed location? His analysis determined that British naval aviation and radar had surpassed German development. The thought that the British had been decoding his communications never arose. Decades later, in his published memoirs written before Ultra became public, Raeder blamed mechanical misfortune and an improbable torpedo strike, unaware that Providence played no part in Bismarck's demise. May 1943 opened with Admiral Dönitz directing the greatest U-boat armada ever assembled. 116 submarines ranged the North Atlantic, divided into wolf packs, bearing predatory designations: Fink, Gruppe Fink, Amsel, Rabe, Meiser, Vogel, and Stern. German cryptanalysts were decrypting British convoy ciphers, and Dönitz perceived victory approaching. Signs of enemy fatigue are mounting, he recorded in his war journal on May 1st. A sustained final offensive will sever the Atlantic lifeline. What Dönitz remained ignorant of was that Bletchley Park had accomplished a cryptanalytic triumph that would seal his submarine's destruction. Following a 10-month interruption caused by the introduction of the 4-rotor Enigma, British codebreakers had finally penetrated the M4 cipher. Utilizing captured codebooks retrieved from U-559, salvaged by sailors who sacrificed their lives recovering materials from the sinking vessel, combined with Colossus, the world's inaugural programmable electronic calculating machine. They recommenced reading German naval messages within hours of transmission. The initial May convoy engagement established what would follow. Convoy ONS-5, comprising 42 freighters traveling from Liverpool toward Halifax, was detected by U-650 on April 28th. Dönitz concentrated 3 wolf packs, 41 submarines total, for coordinated assault. Reading his deployment orders, British Naval Command enhanced the convoy's defensive capabilities and mobilized additional forces toward interception. The clash persisted across 6 days and 600 miles of sea. German submarines destroyed 13 cargo vessels, yet paid an enormous price. 7 U-boats were sunk by escort vessels. U-192, captained by Captain-Lieutenant Antoron Happe, went down following depth charge attacks from HMS Lusitare. U-638 sank with all hands after collision with HMS Sunflower. U-125, U-531, U-438, U-630, and U-528 followed in rapid succession. For the first time during the conflict, losses favored the Allies substantially, though this constituted merely the beginning. As May advanced, each convoy engagement transformed into catastrophic destruction of German submarines. With German deployment plans exposed, the Allies plotted convoy courses through gaps in patrol sectors, simultaneously directing hunter-killer squadrons to emerging Wolfpack staging areas. Aircraft equipped with innovative Lee lights identified U-boats surfacing for battery recharge during nighttime hours. Warships fitted with Hedgehog anti-submarine projectors attained destruction percentages that amazed even their own operators. Convoy HX-237, traversing in middle May, annihilated 3 U-boats without sustaining merchant losses. Convoy SC-130 destroyed 5 submarines with no casualties. The newly commissioned escort carrier USS Bogue, operating with flawless ultra-intelligence, eliminated 6 U-boats within 6 weeks. German submarines faced destruction at rates surpassing replacement capacity, and battle-hardened commanders who had survived prolonged warfare disappeared in seas they had previously commanded. The casualty figures proved stunning. During May 1943, Germany lost 41 U-boats, representing roughly 1/4 of its active submarine strength. 7 fell to aircraft while transiting the Bay of Biscay toward or away from port. 6 perished while refueling from submarine supply vessels at coordinates disclosed through Ultra. 12 died when convoy escorts seemed to anticipate their movements flawlessly. The newest U-209 embarked on maiden patrol before sinking with all 50 crew members on May 7th. The most seasoned was U-192, its commander having survived 12 earlier missions, destroyed on May 6th. On May 24th, Dönitz transmitted the command that signified the effective finish of the Atlantic campaign. All submarines must depart North Atlantic convoy lanes and reassemble in waters southwest of the Azores. In his war diary entry, he acknowledged, "The North Atlantic has been lost to us." He attributed defeat to Allied radar and aircraft superiority, never realizing that his own messages had orchestrated the slaughter of his submarines. Among the war's most striking ironies was how closely Germany came to unmasking the truth, then got deliberately sidetracked by British counterintelligence. The most ingenious deception centered on the Lucy Ring, a Soviet intelligence network headquartered in Switzerland, which appeared to possess astonishing access to German military intelligence. Rudolf Rössler, operating under the codename Lucy, functioned as a German émigré publisher based in Lucerne who managed what appeared to be an autonomous intelligence operation. Beginning in 1942, Lucy fed Soviet intelligence with strikingly precise details regarding German military campaigns, particularly operations along the Eastern Front. His communications encompassed comprehensive German order of battle documentation, planned offensives, and even direct quotations from Hitler's tactical instructions. Information rendered with such extraordinary precision and currency that both German and Soviet intelligence concluded it originated from uppermost Wehrmacht levels. German security services initiated extensive investigations of the Lucy Ring, fully convinced they harbored significant traitors within the high command. The Abwehr and Gestapo interrogated numerous senior officers, including Wehrmacht operations personnel possessing access to Enigma transmissions. They never established that Lucy's material originated not from insider traitors, but from Bletchley Park, passed through Swiss intelligence channels to obscure its genuine provenance. The British confronted an intricate situation. Soviet leadership desperately required ultra-intelligence to counter German assaults, yet Stalin harbored intense distrust of British intentions. making him reluctant to accept capitalist partners' intelligence. Furthermore, transmitting ultra-directly to the Soviets risked compromise through their less rigorous communication protocols, plus the danger of German infiltrators within Soviet command. The resolution demonstrated ingenuity. The strategic intelligence that Britain's codebreakers shared with Switzerland found its way to the Soviets through a network of carefully hidden channels. Swiss intelligence became the intermediary, providing Stalin's operatives with carefully vetted information while maintaining the fiction that these discoveries originated from dissident German officers working against the Nazi regime. This deception allowed Soviet leadership to believe they possessed their own independent intelligence stream, completely separate from Western sources. The information flowed through trusted handlers like Alexander Rado, each message reinforcing Moscow's confidence that their espionage networks had succeeded where others might fail. Yet the Germans sensed something profoundly wrong with the accuracy of Allied operations. Their own field agents worked tirelessly to trace the source of this mysterious intelligence, but their investigations led them down every path imaginable except the one that mattered. During 1943 and 1944, the accumulation of evidence should have screamed the truth at them. Intercepted messages proved correct with impossible regularity. Tactical innovations failed within weeks. Convoys vanished before they could be attacked. The pattern was unmistakable, and yet somehow the German command structure refused to see it. The destruction of the milk cow submarines presented the starkest evidence imaginable. These massive tanker vessels operated at isolated refueling stations scattered across the Atlantic's emptiest expanses. Only U-boat command headquarters knew their precise locations. Only the submarines scheduled for resupply possessed these coordinates. Between June and August of 1943, the catastrophe became undeniable. 14 supply submarines were sent to their designated positions. 10 of them were destroyed. The U-459 went down on July 24th while transferring fuel to the U-117. The U-117 itself sank at a location 500 miles from any shipping route. The U-489 was caught on August 4th at coordinates that command had transmitted just 48 hours earlier. Captain Hermann Mohr, serving German naval intelligence, authored a report that acknowledged the obvious. The mathematical probability of the Allies randomly discovering these secret supply stations approached zero. Either they possessed detection systems beyond German comprehension, or there existed a catastrophic security breach within the naval command structure itself. Yet Mohr's investigation never pursued the most logical answer. He examined every possible explanation except the correct one. Perhaps crew members had been turned by Allied intelligence services. Perhaps neutral sailors had noticed departure patterns from French bases. Perhaps Allied agents had stationed radio operators nearby to intercept transmissions. The notion that Britain had simply decrypted the German naval codes never received serious consideration. The introduction of new German weapon systems produced even more compelling proof. When Germany deployed the acoustic torpedo in September 1943, a weapon designed to home in on escort ship propellers, the Allies had immediate countermeasures ready. Noise-making devices towed behind destroyers and corvettes defeated the new weapon within weeks. The German explanation assumed the Allies must have captured intact torpedoes from destroyed U-boats. When submarine commanders switched to burst transmissions in 1944, compressing entire messages into fractions of a second to defeat direction-finding systems, Allied forces still managed to locate and attack U-boats with startling precision. The German command concluded the British must have developed direction-finding equipment far more sophisticated than anything previously thought possible. Meanwhile, a Japanese naval officer in Berlin, named Captain Yokota Tadao, was observing the tactical patterns with increasing alarm. After studying Allied operations throughout 1944, he sent a coded message to Tokyo. The enemy's precision in locating our German allies suggests they are systematically decrypting German communications. This conclusion contradicts everything we understand about German cipher security, yet no alternative explanation adequately accounts for these patterns. That message, intercepted and decrypted by American cryptanalysts who had broken the Japanese diplomatic codes, triggered brief concern within Bletchley Park. The worry dissipated quickly when German naval intelligence dismissed the Japanese analysis as face-saving attempts to explain their own intelligence failures in the Pacific. Admiral Dönitz emerged as perhaps the most tragic character in this drama of institutional blindness. Widely respected as an exceptional tactician and inspirational commander, his very capabilities created a barrier to recognizing uncomfortable truth. The command system he had designed and perfected became the instrument of his fleet's destruction. Dönitz had transformed submarine warfare through his Wolfpack strategy, exercising centralized tactical control from his headquarters. Powerful radio transmitters allowed him to personally orchestrate operations from command centers in Lorient, Paris, and eventually Berlin. Every U-boat captain reported his position, fuel status, torpedo inventory, and contact reports to headquarters. Dönitz would then direct attacks like a maestro conducting an orchestra, vectoring boats onto convoys with meticulous precision and timing. This approach demanded constant radio communication, precisely what allowed Bletchley Park to track every submarine in the Atlantic. Dönitz transmitted more than 70 radio messages every single day to his fleet, each one intercepted and decrypted by British cryptanalysts. His detailed operational orders revealed not merely current positions, but future intentions, patrol patterns, and tactical innovations still being tested. Dönitz's conviction in his system never weakened. When subordinates raised concerns about the volume of radio traffic, he responded with detailed technical justifications. The Enigma machine was mathematically unbreakable by any known computational standard. German radio discipline surpassed that of any other navy throughout history. Signal codes had been compressed to their minimum length. Frequency changes and call sign modifications prevented traffic analysis by Allied listening stations. In his judgment, German technical superiority guaranteed security from compromise. His war diary reveals a commander increasingly perplexed by unexplained Allied prescience, yet never questioning the foundations of his assumptions. Entry after entry describes convoys executing impossible evasive maneuvers. Escort vessels appear at locations where they shouldn't possibly be. Aircraft discover submerged U-boats at implausibly precise moments. His conclusions remained unchanged regardless of evidence. The Allies possessed more aircraft. They had superior radar systems and far greater resources. The obvious answer never appeared in his writings. The psychological cost of admitting the truth would have destroyed him completely. To acknowledge Enigma's compromise meant accepting that his entire approach to submarine warfare, the revolutionary innovation that had made him Hitler's successor and the architect of German naval strategy, had been fundamentally flawed from inception. Every order he had issued, every tactic he had devised, every submarine he had dispatched to destruction had remained transparent to the enemy. The weight of that realization was unbearable. Even after Germany's defeat, decades before Ultra's secrets were revealed publicly, Dönitz maintained absolute faith in his wartime decisions. His memoirs, published in 1958, attributed U-boat losses to Allied material superiority and better technology. He calculated that Germany would have required 300 active submarines simultaneously to cut Britain's supply lines. He never acknowledged that even 3,000 submarines would have failed if the Allies continued reading his every command. On May 9, 1946, in the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, Admiral Dönitz sat in the defendant's dock. Allied prosecutors questioned his conduct of submarine warfare as he testified to his role in naval operations. That day, his statements would unknowingly expose the magnitude of German ignorance regarding Ultra, while simultaneously revealing how dangerously close he had come to the truth. The enemy's capacity for locating our submarines was simply overwhelming, Dönitz testified. By 1943, our losses had become unsustainable. I was compelled to withdraw our boats from the primary convoy routes. When prosecutors pressed him about specific incidents where supply submarines had been destroyed at remote coordinates, Dönitz offered a technical explanation. We believed the enemy had developed new long-range detection capabilities, perhaps infrared scanning or other detection methods unknown to us. We thoroughly examined the possibility of human intelligence leaks within our command structure. Our investigations found no evidence of traitors. When questioned about convoys that appeared to avoid wolfpack formations with almost supernatural timing, Dönitz attributed this to overwhelming Allied air reconnaissance capabilities. Their surveillance had reached saturation across vast ocean territories. Combined with their radar systems, they possessed the means to track our movements and route convoys accordingly. The Allied prosecutors, fully aware of ultra but bound by secrecy that would persist for another 28 years, pressed Dönitz on specific intelligence catastrophes without revealing their actual source. They questioned the precise interception of the U-459 at refueling coordinates, the destruction of wolfpacks at assembly points, the consistent failure of every major tactical innovation weeks after implementation. To each question, Dönitz offered technical justifications: high-frequency direction-finding systems, sophisticated radar, talk between ships' radio systems enabling instant escort coordination, air-to-surface vessel radar, magnetic anomaly detection equipment, sonobuoys. Each explanation possessed partial validity. These technologies genuinely existed and saw extensive use. Yet none addressed the fundamental intelligence advantage that transformed these tools into devastating weapons. The exchange between prosecutor David Maxwell Fyfe and Dönitz proved most revealing about the depth of German ignorance. "Admiral, did you ever suspect your communications were being decrypted?" I pursued this question multiple times. Our cryptographic specialists assured me that Enigma possessed mathematical security beyond compromise. Breaking it would demand resources exceeding any nation's technical capacity. Yet your U-boat losses continued accumulating. Yes, but this resulted from enemy technological superiority rather than intelligence failure. They possessed radar-detecting periscopes at 20 miles. Aircraft appeared without warning. Weapons systems we could not effectively counter. You never suspected the Allies were decrypting your radio transmissions. Our communications were secured by the most advanced encryption system in existence. The possibility you mention was thoroughly examined and definitively rejected by our leading cryptographic experts. Dönitz's testimony was particularly poignant because he possessed considerable intelligence himself. His measured IQ reached 138, well within the gifted range. He had correctly identified numerous Allied technological capabilities and tactical innovations. He had posed the appropriate investigative questions and demanded rigorous analysis. Yet his unshakable faith in Enigma's absolute security created a mental barrier that proved completely impenetrable. The most damning evidence of widespread German institutional blindness emerged on August 10, 1943, when Swiss intelligence, operating as a neutral nation generally trusted by both sides, delivered an explicit warning that demanded immediate response. Through classified intelligence sources, Swiss operatives had learned of Allied success in breaking German naval ciphers. The report, transmitted through diplomatic channels to Admiral Dönitz of the Abwehr, stated with stark clarity: over recent months, Germany's naval ciphers used for transmitting operational orders to U-boat command have been successfully decrypted. All orders are currently being read by enemy intelligence. The German response demonstrated the absolute depths of their psychological investment in Enigma's invulnerability. Upon receiving notification of the Swiss warning, Dönitz wrote in his personal war diary on August 13, "Report received from Switzerland claims enemy is reading our ciphers." This assertion is inconceivable. He ordered another comprehensive security review while already deciding its conclusions in advance. The subsequent investigation, directed by corvette Captain Meckel, dismissed the Swiss intelligence as Allied disinformation designed to undermine German confidence in their cipher systems. The investigating committee's reasoning betrayed their fundamental blindness. If the Allies truly possessed the ability to read German naval communications, why hadn't they achieved dramatically more catastrophic victories? Why did certain convoys still unexpectedly encounter wolfpacks? Why did some U-boats successfully evade hunter-killer groups? These questions possessed simple answers. The Allies deliberately permitted limited losses to preserve their cryptographic advantage. Yet German investigators could not conceive of such sophisticated strategic restraint. German counterintelligence simultaneously investigated how Swiss intelligence had obtained this information. They concluded it must originate from Allied agents attempting to sow discord and paranoia within the German naval command structure. The probability that Switzerland had simply observed obvious patterns in Allied operations never received consideration. The German inability to even imagine Bletchley Park's operations stemmed partly from their inability to comprehend the technological and organizational innovations enabling industrial-scale cryptanalysis. German codebreakers employed paper, pencils, and mechanical calculating devices. The notion of electronic computing machines capable of testing thousands of Enigma configurations hourly remained confined to science fiction fantasy. By 1944, Bletchley Park had transformed into something unprecedented. The Colossus machines, designed by Tommy Flowers and kept absolutely secret even within Bletchley Park itself, processed 5,000 characters per second. German mathematicians wouldn't have believed such speeds possible. The bomb machines, developed from Polish designs by Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman, could test over 17,000 Enigma positions in just 20 minutes. Human cryptanalysts would require months for equivalent work. The organizational structure exceeded anything German intelligence could have imagined. Bletchley Park employed more than 9,000 personnel by 1945, with 80% being women who operated machines, transcribed intercepted messages, and maintained the vast filing systems tracking millions of decoded communications. 3 shifts operated continuously throughout the 24-hour day, processing over 3,000 intercepted messages at maximum capacity. Messages received prioritization based on operational urgency, with U-boat communications receiving top priority for naval intelligence purposes. The systematic approach to cryptanalysis would have astonished German experts. Every single Enigma message ever successfully decrypted was filed and cross-referenced. Patterns in operator behavior were carefully documented. Lazy operators who recycled girlfriends' names as message keys. Predictable weather reports providing essential cribs. Standard military phrases appearing in routine administrative communications. Britain had industrialized a process Germany still treated as an artistic craft requiring individual genius. German cryptanalysts expressed genuine astonishment upon learning about the scale of British operations. Dr. Erich Huttenheim, interrogated by American personnel in 1945 and informed of Bletchley Park's massive scale, reportedly responded simply, "No wonder you broke it. You treated code-breaking like manufacturing bombers, using mass production methods. We treated it like writing poetry, dependent on individual creative genius." A moment of near-catastrophic discovery arrived on November 30, 1943, when a British Lancaster bomber was shot down near Berlin. Amid the charred debris, German investigators came across something that should have sent immediate warning signals. A partially charred document bearing what looked like German naval grid coordinates and U-boat positions marked just 2 days earlier. Hauptmann Wilhelm Domus of Luftwaffe Intelligence received the assignment to examine this discovery. Though incomplete and burned at the edges, the document unmistakably displayed the locations of 3 submarines, U-391, U-238, and U-648, at exact coordinates that aligned precisely with where these vessels actually were on November 28. This level of intelligence accuracy and currency was too sophisticated to have originated from aerial photography or spy networks. Domus conducted a detailed investigation, though it ultimately led him down the wrong path. He settled on a conclusion: the British operatives must maintain an impressive web of informants stationed throughout French harbors, quietly monitoring when U-boats departed and when they returned home. Combined with radio direction finding techniques applied to German transmissions, this approach might theoretically produce approximate location data. His report did mention the remote possibility that British forces were intercepting actual German location communications. Yet he dismissed this with barely a sentence. Technical authorities had already ruled out codes being compromised. The incident created genuine alarm at Bletchley Park after they intercepted German communications, confirming the recovery of classified materials. Protective measures were activated immediately. For the following quarter year, intelligence drawn from Ultra received even more elaborate protective cover stories, and any information that couldn't be reasonably credited to conventional sources was withheld from active military operations. The June 6, 1944 D-Day assault represented both Ultra's brightest moment and the absolute nadir of German intelligence capability. Despite launching the most colossal seaborne assault ever attempted, deploying more than 6,000 ships and 150,000 troops in the opening phase, German defenders were left completely unprepared. The ability to maintain surprise at the tactical level while strategic surprise became impossible demonstrated the overwhelming supremacy of Allied intelligence mastery. Through Ultra, the Allies possessed complete understanding of what German commanders actually believed. Every analysis from Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, every fortification order authorized by Rommel, every assessment transmitted to Hitler was being deciphered at Bletchley Park, typically before the German recipients themselves could decode their own messages. This capacity empowered the Allies to execute deception with exceptional accuracy. Operation Fortitude, the scheme designed to persuade Germans that the main assault would strike at Pas-de-Calais, succeeded precisely because the Allies could observe German responses instantaneously via ultra-intercepts. When German intelligence detected powerful Allied concentrations building opposite Pas-de-Calais, actually inflatable vehicles, and fabricated radio networks, the Allies could access German evaluations and fine-tune their deception strategy. When German assessments wavered, reinforcing evidence materialized. Even after the Normandy beachhead opened, ultra-decrypts of German transmissions revealed commanders still thought Normandy represented a secondary landing. Hitler's decision to keep panzer divisions in place near Pas-de-Calais for 7 critical weeks was influenced significantly by intelligence evaluations the Allies were simultaneously reading and reinforcing through sustained deception campaigns. German command was not merely caught off guard, they were engaged in a conflict orchestrated by opponents reading their innermost communications. Admiral Theodor Kranke, heading naval operations in the Western Theater, would afterwards reflect on the intelligence catastrophe. We possessed nothing. Our reconnaissance capabilities were blind. Our intelligence gathering was mute. The enemy materialized from obscurity, wielding overwhelming superiority. He never comprehended that rather than total ignorance, the actual dilemma was complete Allied knowledge. By autumn 1944, mounting puzzles should have eroded German certainty about their transmission security. Submarines fitted with advanced snorkel systems, permitting prolonged submerged operations throughout entire assignments, continued disappearing with disturbing regularity. Advanced acoustic weapons were neutralized before inflicting meaningful harm. Fresh tactical approaches were instantly countered by Allied responses. Yet German analysts persisted in identifying other causes. When snorkel-equipped vessels went down, inquiries attributed losses to enhanced Allied detection apparatus and magnetic anomaly sensors. When revised Wolfpack maneuvers failed, they credited it to overwhelming Allied air presence across operating zones. When supply missions were repeatedly disrupted, they suggested possible infrared sensing of diesel engines or wake signatures detectable from high altitudes. Perhaps most telling was the March 1945 destruction of U-86 off the American coastline, merely days following departure from Norwegian bases. The vessel had preserved absolute radio silence, relying purely on snorkel and moving along a course recognized exclusively by submarine command. Destruction at those precise coordinates should have remained beyond reach absent intelligence from radio intercepts. Yet German analysis attributed the loss to American hunter-killer formations achieving such concentration along their coasts that discovery became unavoidable. Captain Günther Hessler, Dönnitz's son-in-law and chief of U-boat command, approached nearest to recognizing the truth in April 1945. In a command session, he reportedly declared, "Either Americans possess capabilities surpassing our knowledge, or they inhabit our thoughts." Admiral Gott, Dönnitz's deputy, reacted with swift rejection. Pessimistic commentary cannot be permitted. Our transmission systems remain inviolable. May 1945 arrived as the Third Reich crumbled. Allied intelligence divisions swept through Germany in Operation Tycom, racing to gather German cryptographic experts and equipment ahead of destruction or Soviet capture. What emerged revealed both impressive cryptanalytic sophistication and remarkable blindness regarding their communication vulnerabilities. Interrogations of Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, senior cryptanalyst for OKW-8G, yielded striking perspectives into German understanding. Upon learning that Allies had been reading Enigma transmissions continuously from 1940 onward, Hüttenhain's first reaction was outright denial. Inconceivable. The mathematical complication surpasses human capability. Upon inspection of genuine decrypted messages, his disbelief transformed absolute. This would demand thousands of workers and expenditures beyond reasonable measure. When interrogators described Bletchley Park's operational magnitude, Hüttenhain's words exposed the conceptual error protecting Ultra's secret. We determined that defeating Enigma required expenses no nation would practically allocate toward codebreaking. We never fathomed you would prioritize it identically to manufacturing bombers or enlisting soldiers. Wilhelm Trano, the exceptional cryptographer who had penetrated British convoy communications, expressed parallel astonishment. During his TICOM interviews, he confessed something appeared incorrect. Excessive fortune, too many fortunate coincidences. However, whenever I proposed communications compromise, colleagues dismissed me as paranoid. Cracking Enigma stood as mathematically impossible. Lower-ranking personnel interrogations uncovered suppressed worries pervading the system. Radio technicians reported noticing suspicious patterns suggesting adversary foreknowledge. You heard field commanders questioning how merchant convoys always seemed to shift course at precisely the right instances. Intelligence professionals had assembled evidence of statistical impossibilities in Allied operational achievements. However, at all organizational levels, these apprehensions met identical treatment. Enigma cannot be compromised. Particularly enlightening was the questioning of Kapitan Heinz Bonatz, former chief of B-Dienst. Upon absorbing news about Ultra, he sat motionless for extended moments before speaking. Then we possessed no alternative. From when you broke Enigma, our outcome was determined. All subsequent events, the engagements, the methodology, the suffering, represented merely postponement. The Ultra revelation stayed classified by the Official Secrets Act until 1974, representing one of history's greatest intelligence security achievements. More than 10,000 Bletchley Park contributors observed strict confidentiality for nearly 3 decades. They resumed ordinary civilian existences, unable to clarify employment gaps, prohibited from sharing military experiences, even with family members, and forced to hear flawed historical accounts of the conflict without the capacity to object. This classified status achieved multiple objectives. Throughout the post-war era, American and British intelligence agencies deployed confiscated Enigma machines for communications with nations gaining independence, who supposed they possessed cutting-edge encryption technology. Crucially, Bletchley Park innovations were being redirected towards Soviet transmission analysis during Cold War tensions, and exposing these breakthroughs would have damaged active operations. The personal sacrifice from this concealment proved considerable. Exceptional mathematicians and cryptanalysts accepted academic careers without acknowledgement for transformative breakthroughs in computational mathematics and analysis. Female personnel operating the bombs and Colossus computing systems, conducting labor that furnished computer science's origins, could not claim rightful positions in technological evolution. Bletchley Park veterans encountered disbelief regarding their wartime contributions, prevented from substantiating their accomplishments. Gordon Welchley, architect of the diagonal board alteration that transformed bomb machines into genuinely potent instruments, departed for America and undertook secret assignments. Upon ultimately releasing his account, The Hut 6 Story, in 1982, he confronted prosecution threats via the Official Secrets Act despite general Ultra declassification. His passing in 1985 ultimately permitted recognition for breakthroughs instrumental to victory, yet accompanied by official reproach for revealing classified operational matters. The barrier shattered in 1974 when Group Captain Frederick Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret. Winterbotham, responsible for special liaison divisions handling ultra circulation, had struggled for years seeking authorization to disclose this history. His motivations intertwined: individual recognition, historical truthfulness, and apprehension that essential understandings regarding intelligence and conflict were disappearing. The publication sparked upheaval through historical scholarship and surviving German commanders. Researchers suddenly confronted the requirement to re-examine World War II fundamentally. Engagements credited to superior generalship or favorable circumstances surfaced as intelligence achievements. Allied commanders appearing brilliantly prescient demonstrated instead they were perusing adversary transmissions. For German survivors, the discovery inflicted profound injury. General Adolf Galland, previous Luftwaffe fighter commander, purportedly remarked, "For 30 years I questioned how Allied forces consistently identified our positions. Currently I comprehend. They read our orders prior to our reception." Admiral Dönitz's reaction embodied competing feelings. In his hasty correspondence with Winterbotham's publisher, he professed having perpetually anticipated communications vulnerability. His assertion contradicted his documented wartime journal, his subsequent memoirs, and subordinate statements affirming his absolute conviction in Enigma's security throughout hostilities. The psychological compulsion to retroactively express suspicion illustrated the gravity of professional humiliation. The starkest reckoning happened at a 1978 intelligence symposium held in Germany, where previous competitors gathered publicly for the initial instance. Hosted by the German Naval Museum, the gathering assembled British codebreakers from Bletchley Park and German personnel managing Enigma equipment. The principal session paired Harry Hinsley, retired Bletchley Park mathematician and certified British intelligence chronicler, with Wilhelm Tranu and additional B-Dienst personnel. Hinsley's address methodically dismantled every presumption Germans held about wartime communications protection. He displayed deciphered messages, illustrated cryptographic approaches, and quantified the range of Allied decryption operations. German attendees manifested simultaneous professional appreciation and private anguish. Tranu, preserving outward composure, posed technical inquiries regarding British methodology, plainly admiring the mathematical sophistication of the assaults. Yet when conversation shifted toward wartime operational consequences, feeling overwhelmed rationality. The most acrimonious exchange materialized when Otto Kretschmer, Germany's most accomplished submarine commander, engaged former Dönitzs subordinates persisting in defending their wartime selections. When they restated the steamroller argument that German initiatives were formulated to force Allied maximum dedication independent of intelligence, Kretschmer erupted. "Steamroller, we transmitted personnel into missions the adversary recognized beforehand. Each deployment order, each tactical revision, each last-ditch maneuver, adversaries possessed complete information. You maintain this was strategy?" The quarrel nearly became violent before moderators separated the participants, though Kretschmer's fury communicated what numerous German veterans internalized. They felt betrayed not by opponents, but by their hierarchy's rejection of communications compromise as probable. Afterward, German codebreakers performed comprehensive assessments of Enigma's breakdown. The conclusions offered simultaneously comfort and unease. The mechanism remained mathematically sound, though human operation contained catastrophic weaknesses. The 1932 Polish success had exploited a procedural deficiency. Germans duplicated the message encryption key at message beginning. This repetition, planned to guarantee precision, furnished the mathematical connection, permitting Marian Rajkowski to reconstruct Enigma rotor architecture utilizing permutation mathematics. When Germans corrected this practice in 1940, Poles already transferred their understanding to British partners. British codebreaking evolved from Polish achievements, yet demanded immense technological advancement. The bomb mechanisms created by Turing and Welchly exploited Enigma's cardinal restriction: no letter could transform to itself. By evaluating possible rotor configurations against recognized plaintext, bombs could exclude impossible arrangements at computational velocity. German safety rules, though thorough, inadvertently assisted British decryption. Prohibitions against repeating rotor positions daily permitted British codebreakers to dismiss yesterday's arrangements immediately. Stringent requirements governing transmission formatting produced predictable plain text. Situation announcements consistently utilized identical beginnings. Procurement demands adhered to prescribed layouts, and daily summaries embodied recurring content. Most dangerously, German faith in Enigma produced careless security practices. Communications incorporated details appearing within less protected channels. When Dönitzs succeeded against British convoy transmissions, German U-boat command forwarded British merchant positions through Enigma, furnishing flawless plaintext for British mathematicians who already recognized actual convoy movements. Scholars and military analysts have devoted considerable study to examining how Ultra shaped the war's ultimate conclusion. The official estimate from Sahari Hinsley, suggesting that Ultra compressed the timeline by somewhere between 2 and 4 years, gained widespread acceptance among experts. Yet the ramifications extend well beyond simply calculating months and years added or subtracted. Ultra transformed how warfare itself was waged. Never before had one combatant possessed the capability to routinely intercept and decrypt an adversary's most closely guarded secrets almost instantaneously. This represented something far more profound than a simple tactical edge. It amounted to strategic illumination. From 1941 onward, every German attack encountered opponents who possessed advanced knowledge of their intentions, available forces, and frequently their specific goals weeks or even months beforehand. The Atlantic campaign illustrated Ultra's true scope most starkly. Academic calculations indicate Ultra-derived intelligence preserved somewhere between 300 and 500 cargo vessels, representing roughly 1.5 to 2 million tons of carrying capacity. Absent this protection, the United Kingdom would have faced critical food shortages by mid-1941. Being able to navigate merchant convoys around German submarine formations meant Britain's continued existence versus German triumph. Across North Africa, intelligence intercepts permitted Montgomery to engage the Battle of Alamein with comprehensive understanding of Rommel's strategy. His deployment positioned troops precisely where the German commander intended to strike, establishing zones of devastating fire that decimated Axis armor before it could deploy effectively. At Alamein, Montgomery possessed detailed intelligence regarding German fuel reserves, armored vehicle quantities, and specific strongpoint locations down to individual tank positions. The D-Day assault achieved victory partly because Ultra exposed exactly how German leadership assessed the situation. Every German intelligence conclusion anticipating an invasion at Calais reached Allied strategists, enabling them to refine their deception scheme. Before regional commanders even opened German reinforcement directives, Allied intelligence knew their contents, permitting forces to intercept German units before they approached combat zones. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the cost inflicted by German unawareness regarding Ultra. Untold thousands of German military personnel perished, executing operations fundamentally compromised from their inception, as their orders had been intercepted and decrypted before officers transmitted them. U-boat personnel experienced the war's most devastating casualty rates proportionally. 75% mortality among the 40,000 sailors serving in submarines. They navigated toward engagements where opposing forces possessed exact coordinate data, fuel consumption estimates, ammunition inventories, and mission parameters. These submariners displayed extraordinary courage against circumstances designed to overwhelm them, yet remained unaware their situation was engineered against them because their adversaries possessed their communications. Luftwaffe fighter pilots encountered coordinated ambuscades established weeks earlier. Transport planes conveying urgently required materials to surrounded garrisons were intercepted with such consistency that crews referred to themselves as mobile coffins. Fighter squadrons discovered that enemy bomber formations systematically bypassed their patrolled zones and targeted unprotected locations, not from fortunate reconnaissance efforts, but from intelligence obtained by deciphering positioning assignments. Wehrmacht troops executed maneuvers where adversaries understood their available strength, tactical objectives, and frequently their exact moment of commencement. Catastrophic losses sustained during operations into Russia, collapse of fortified positions in Italian territory, and breakdown of successive major offensive efforts from the coast through the Ardennes all reflected Allied comprehension through Ultra. When German military professionals confronted Ultra's existence in 1974, the psychological consequence proved devastating. Their comprehension of the entire conflict demanded fundamental rethinking. Setbacks previously believed attributable to insufficient resources or poor strategy emerged as intelligence catastrophes. Servicemen who had perished executing desperate maneuvers had instead been directed into carefully designed kill zones established by opponents deciphering their transmission orders. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of lightning warfare tactics, inscribed thoughts in correspondence discovered posthumously. Comprehending Ultra resembled realizing your entire existence represented a theatrical production where spectators possessed knowledge of the dialogue except the performer on stage. Every decision I formulated, every command I dispatched, every strategy I constructed, our opponents comprehended completely. We functioned not as military commanders directing forces, we performed as theatrical figures for observers possessing full awareness of our lines. For Admiral Dönitz, surviving until 1980, this revelation saturated his remaining decades. Colleagues observed his deepening isolation, expending days working backward through previous engagements, employing newfound comprehension that his transmissions had suffered breach. His unpublished concluding manuscript apparently contained substantial revisions regarding his comprehension of submarine operations, acknowledging that insufficient submarines and no procedural creativity might have overcome opposition reading every directive. The psychological consequence transcended commanding officers affecting regular combatants. U-boat associations established peer networks, processing comprehension that their operations had proven futile through intelligence breakdown instead of martial inadequacy. Luftwaffe fighter pilots reconsidered their experiences of unexpected numerical disadvantage at decisive interception situations. Wehrmacht personnel grasped how intelligence breakdowns at upper echelons had compounded their sacrifices. The German inability to recognize Enigma's exposure provides instructive observations regarding organizational limitations and the perils of inflexible conviction. The Wehrmacht's security evaluation framework possessed sophistication, methodical processes, and competent, motivated personnel, yet functioned inadequately because foundational presumptions remained beyond questioning. Each examination proceeded from the assumption that Enigma remained trustworthy. Information obtained went through this predetermined interpretation with competing explanations pressured to accommodate pre-established conclusions. Whenever cargo transports vanished at isolated geographic positions, investigators examined espionage operations, detection equipment, and surveillance missions, instead of examining transmission compromise. Whenever submarine formations repeatedly disappeared when pursuing merchant ships, they attributed responsibility to opposing air power instead of questioning whether deployment locations had been previously disclosed. The compartmentalization guarding Enigma similarly prevented thorough security review. Personnel specialists guaranteeing operators that the mechanism was mathematically impenetrable. Operators guaranteeing officers that procedures functioned precisely. Officers guaranteeing leadership that safeguards stayed intact. No single individual bore authority for examining the complete mechanism, and anybody presenting questions experienced organizational pushback toward conformity. German technical confidence produced unforeseen vulnerabilities. The conviction that German technical skill and mathematical ability transcended Allied achievement generated oversights. Whenever findings suggested divergence, submarines evading with remarkable precision, merchant traffic eliminated at distant positions. They pursued even more elaborate hypotheticals, rather than conceding that Allies possessed enhanced decryption knowledge. Throughout the conflict, Germans encountered notifications they systematically disregarded or misinterpreted. Every notification presented a prospect for discovering actuality that organizational obstruction prevented them from recognizing. During February 1942, the German naval leadership in Tokyo reported that American naval operations appeared informed regarding Japanese strategy. The Germans dismissed this as Japanese deflection concerning their territorial setbacks, overlooking that if Americans deciphered Japanese transmissions, German communications might similarly be vulnerable. Swiss information services provided explicit communication in August 1943. German submarine communications suffered compromise. Germany's response focused upon investigating who supplied the Swiss, rather than examining their substantive message. They reasoned that Allied intelligence had deliberately deceived the Swiss observers, overlooking that Switzerland's neutral perspective had simply identified the evident pattern of Allied operational comprehension. German intelligence departments themselves contained subdued questioning. When Wehrmacht cryptography specialist Lieutenant Friedrich documented mathematical aberrations in merchant fleet navigation decisions, his documentation met suppression, accompanied by commentary that equations cannot independently determine intelligence tactics. When individual commanders transmitted observations that merchant formations seemed to foresee their positions, they encountered directives to enhance transmission discipline instead of questioning whether transmissions remained confidential. The greatest contradiction within the Enigma circumstance stems from German cryptography triumphs. Whereas Germany stayed uninformed concerning Enigma's failure, they successfully decrypted numerous Western communication systems across the conflict. They deciphered British merchant communications, American diplomatic transmissions, and Soviet military information exchange. This accomplishment might have generated awareness that communication systems remained vulnerable, that encoding never guaranteed secrecy, that successful code penetration remained achievable through sufficient commitment and persistence. Conversely, their achievements intensified their unawareness. German specialists recognized decryption's inherent difficulty, what commitment it demanded, what regularity failures occurred. They attributed their own constraints to all other parties, believing that if Germany battled continuously attempting unauthorized British communications, despite substantial commitment, Allied attempts against the sophisticated Enigma apparatus must encounter proportionally greater impediment. Wilhelm Trano's attainment in decrypting British merchant communications persuaded him regarding decryption's realistic scope. He comprehended that sustained access, regardless of obtained documentation, required permanent modification and repeated stoppage whenever communication patterns transformed. He couldn't foresee the Allies having transformed decryption from specialized art into standardized procedure, from specific individuals into collective endeavor. German cryptographic accomplishments paradoxically contributed to strategic loss. Deciphering merchant codes permitted ideal submarine positioning. However, these coordinates transmitted via Enigma communications supplied incomparable sources for Bletchley Park specialists. German tactical intelligence attainments accelerated their strategic intelligence catastrophe. Following Ultra's disclosure in 1974, German military scholars initiated extensive re-examinations regarding World War II European operations. The results devastated conventional depictions regarding German military competence and Allied industrial capacity. The North African defeats, formerly credited to logistics obstacles and Allied numerical advantages, materialized as intelligence operations. Rommel's logistics got intercepted because the Allies comprehended precisely when and where transportation vessels would emerge. His procedural achievements faltered because Montgomery recognized his approach before German brigade leadership received their assignments. The Battle of Kursk, humanity's greatest tank engagement, underwent reconsideration, recognizing ultra-derived intelligence. Russian soldiers possessed comprehensive information regarding German offensive timing, magnitude, and intentions weeks preceding the operation. What appeared representing tactical Soviet preparation skill materialized as operational comprehension conveyed through Allied ultra-intelligence, transmitted covertly through the Lucy espionage organization functioning in Switzerland. The Atlantic Wall's powerlessness, preventing D-Day invasion, gained reinterpretation. Understanding that every German defensive arrangement reached Allied commanders. Rommel's defensive barriers, reserve positioning, Hitler's military determinations, everything remained transparent to opposition, possessing their maximum secrecy communications. The Atlantic Wall experienced breakdown not from Allied industrial advantage, rather from thorough comprehension of its every weakness alongside systematic exploitation. Even German accomplishments underwent reconsideration. The early achievements during the Ardennes operation in December 1944 transpired partially because atmospheric conditions prevented ultra-intelligence from arriving at field leadership with sufficient promptness. Upon atmospheric improvement and operational communications re-establishment, opposing forces comprehended precisely which directions German offensive elements traveled, permitting troop positioning accordingly. Throughout the 1970s, aging German intelligence professionals encountering Ultra's revelation offered irreplaceable perspective concerning their wartime operational unintelligence. Their narratives, collected by researchers prior to this generation's passing, illuminate the human dynamics surrounding intelligence breakdown. Heinz Bonatz, previous B-Dienst administrator, expressed perspective in a 1979 reflection. We demonstrated excessive sophistication. Our competence in cryptographic operations prevented us from imagining anyone surpassing it. We recognized indicators implying breach, yet rationalized them through progressively elaborate hypotheses. Acknowledging they were intercepting our communications proved psychologically unbearable. Dr. Erich Huttenheim, Wehrmacht primary cryptography specialist, observed in 1976, "Our mathematical theories functioned properly. Enigma remained mathematically unbreakable, considering what we envisioned regarding achievable calculation. We never envisioned British investment of countless personnel and vast monetary commitment toward this objective. We formulated conclusions resembling engineers, not combatants struggling for endurance." Otto Kretschmer, the storied submarine commander surviving after his 1941 imprisonment, expressed perhaps the most affecting observation. "We navigated submitting ourselves to destruction, assuming we represented warriors. We functioned instead as victims experiencing our superiors' organizational blindness." Each underwater mission bore compromise from commencement. Every procedural enhancement got recognized by opposition preceding application. We persevered, displaying valor against mathematics itself, not opposing fighters. The subsequent generation inheriting the legacies of German World War II participants experienced their particular wrestling with Ultra. Numerous had internalized narratives celebrating selfless combat against overwhelming opposition. Comprehending that their relations experienced methodical betrayal from systematic breakdowns in Germany's highest intelligence echelons created multifaceted emotional complexity. Hans-Peter Dönitz, Admiral Dönitz's grandson, documented experience in his 2003 memoir, "My grandfather departed existence, convinced he had exhausted possibilities fighting the Atlantic campaign. Encountering Ultra's revelation compelled our relations to encounter divergent comprehension, one recognizing his revolutionary modification, concentrating direction through transmission communications, turning into the mechanism, demolishing his submarine formations. He demonstrated no incompetence, yet he experienced deception from his personal convictions. Survivor organizations wrestled with comprehension. The Submarine Survivor Association, Verband Deutsche U-Boot-Fahrer, coordinated educational seminars throughout the 1970s and 1980s, bringing in scholars communicating Ultra's significance regarding the Atlantic engagement. Numerous members questioned the material initially, unable acknowledging that their participation experienced magnification from intelligence breakdowns. Numerous discovered paradoxical solace, comprehending their reverses, reflected higher-level compromise instead of individual accountability. The Enigma revelation fundamentally shaped post-war German cryptographic methodology in remarkable ways. The Bundeswehr military structure, initiated in 1955, established communications safeguard requirements specifically crafted avoiding reoccurrence of Enigma-proportioned intelligence betrayal. German cryptography professionals rejected certainty in cryptographic impermeability, alternatively presuming all communications bore compromise capability and executing preventative tactics accordingly. Simultaneous encryption apparatus operated alongside one another, utilizing distinct communication channels for essential communications. Communication reduction became methodology when not entirely necessary, transforming prior Wehrmacht orientation, emphasizing perpetual exchange. The psychological scarring inside German intelligence organizations lingered generationally. The BND intelligence organization performed with near-obsessive transmission safeguarding, occasionally constraining operations via excessive security consideration. Enigma's traumatic consequences created organizational temperament accepting compromise instead of assurance. Historians and military scholars throughout the post-war generation undertook fundamental re-examination regarding European theater World War II operations. Everything historians had previously studied about military operations required fundamental re-examination once they understood the true picture. One side possessed overwhelming information advantage. When German military leadership's operational genius gets scrutinized through this lens, their accomplishments appear considerably less remarkable. Their enemies possessed their plans beforehand. The contrast proves striking and unavoidable. From 1939 through 1941, before the consistent flow of ultra-intelligence, German forces achieved remarkable victories. But from 1942 onward, as Enigma's secrets became increasingly transparent, those same forces suffered systematic, mounting defeats. Individual German military figures needed complete re-evaluation through this new framework. Rommel's legend as the Desert Fox retained much of its luster despite these revelations. His actual tactical acumen survived largely undiminished, even when Ultra robbed him of strategic advantage. Yet others experienced far harsher reassessment. Dönitz's celebrated Wolfpack tactics, once hailed as revolutionary breakthroughs, now stood revealed as catastrophic weaknesses that hastened German collapse. The Allies' senior commanders similarly required fresh appraisal. Montgomery's seemingly overly cautious tactics at El Alamein appeared considerably bolder once historians acknowledged he possessed complete visibility into German positions and capabilities. Eisenhower's strategy of broad frontal advancement looked substantially more sound when viewed against Ultra's revelations about German reserves and strategic intentions. Much of what had seemed like military genius proved to be something far simpler: superior information. Yet one question lingered stubbornly through decades of careful scholarship. Why did German intelligence, typically competent and sometimes brilliant, fail so spectacularly to recognize that Enigma had been compromised? Mountains of evidence pointed toward the truth, yet somehow they missed it entirely. The explanation transcends individual mistakes or personal failings. Instead, a systematic blindness had taken root, reinforced by multiple converging factors. Mathematical certainty had calcified into unquestionable dogma. Technical pride made the prospect of Allied cryptographic superiority psychologically unbearable to contemplate. Rigid compartmentalization within the German command structure prevented anyone from assembling the full picture. Institutional inertia smothered individual warnings and doubts before they could gain traction. Officers searching for alternative explanations, however improbable, clung to them desperately rather than face the horrifying alternative. But beneath all these organizational factors lay something more fundamental and human: psychological self-preservation. Accepting Enigma's complete compromise would have meant acknowledging something almost incomprehensible. Every single operational plan sat exposed to enemy eyes. Every tactical maneuver had been telegraphed before troops received their marching orders. Every command sent thousands toward deaths that enemies had already anticipated and prepared for. The human consciousness recoils from such terrible understanding, instinctively seeking any escape route, however implausible, rather than staring directly into such systematic, total failure. In 1979, 5 years after the ultra-secret finally emerged into public knowledge, and merely 1 year before his passing, Admiral Dönitz granted what would be his final remarks about the intelligence catastrophe that had decimated his submarine forces. At 88 years old, having carried for decades the burden of knowing his every directive had remained transparent to adversaries, the last Führer of the Third Reich finally spoke candidly about his suspicions. "You inquire whether I suspected," he began, his voice still bearing that distinctive tone of wartime authority. "Naturally, I harbored suspicions. All of us sensed something remained amiss, yet there exists a chasm between suspicion and genuine knowledge. To harbor suspicion that your opponent possesses advantages represents sound military judgment. To comprehend that your innermost thoughts stand revealed to him crosses into the realm of madness," he continued. His gaze drifted toward the window of his modest apartment, surveying the tranquil German countryside beyond. Such a profound contrast to the Atlantic battlefields where his crews had perished beneath the waves. Might we have triumphed had we possessed such knowledge? No, he answered his own hypothetical. By 1943, when Enigma fell completely into Allied hands, The war's ultimate conclusion had already been determined by forces beyond our influence. However, we might have faced defeat differently. Lives could have been preserved through tactical adaptation, through accepting defensive postures, through acknowledging reality rather than pursuing phantoms. His expression darkened. The true devastation was not our defeat itself, but our complete ignorance regarding its causes. We assigned blame to countless factors: insufficient industrial capacity, technological shortcomings, Allied air superiority, everything except confronting the genuine truth. 30,000 men perished aboard my submarines. Countless died executing operations the enemy had already decoded, grasping the strategic picture before my own commanders comprehended their assignments. They demonstrated extraordinary courage, these submariners, confronting adversaries who possessed access to our innermost communications. They never stood a chance, yet they never wavered. His voice dropped lower. In warfare, certainty represents the ultimate adversary. We possessed unshakable confidence in Enigma's impenetrability. That very confidence murdered more of my submariners than all the depth charges and aircraft the Allies deployed. Those deaths rest upon my shoulders, and that burden will accompany me to the grave. The numerical reality of Ultra's consequences reveals the magnitude of German strategic blindness through cold, undeniable statistics. Enigma machines and their technical specifications tell part of the story. Between 1920 and 1945, manufacturers produced more than 100,000 Enigma devices. The three-rotor version deployed by the Wehrmacht permitted 159 quintillion distinct theoretical configurations. The Navy's four-rotor M4 variant offered astronomical complexity, 10 to the 23rd power possible variations. Every single day required completely fresh key configurations, new solutions every 24 hours without exception. By 1944, the Germans operated over 1,244 separate radio networks, each requiring its own distinct Enigma keys. The sheer technical sophistication was staggering. The breaking of that system unfolded across years. Polish codebreakers achieved initial Enigma penetration in December 1932, pioneering cryptanalytic methods that would prove foundational. Bletchley Park commenced operations in August 1939. Personnel swelled to approximately 9,000 people by January 1945, with roughly 80% comprising women. The facility operated 200 bomb machines at peak capacity, 10 Colossus computers, representing the world's inaugural programmable electronic calculating devices, hummed constantly through the war's concluding months. Processing capacity expanded dramatically as years passed. By 1944, the station intercepted 5,000-plus messages daily. By 1945, the average time from message interception to decoded intelligence had compressed to merely 2.5 hours. A stunning operational achievement. The human cost of German ignorance translated into staggering numbers. Of 1,162 submarines commissioned for active service, 783 met destruction, a devastating 67.4% loss rate. Among the 40,000 submariner personnel who served, 30,000 perished, a crushing 75% casualty rate. During May 1943 alone, the month German submariners would forever remember as Black May, 41 U-boats went down. Ultra-guided convoy routing preserved 14.67 million tons of Allied merchant shipping that would otherwise have faced the ocean bottom. More than 500 individual merchant vessels survived specifically because of intelligence-driven evasive maneuvers based on decoded German communications. Air warfare felt this impact equally. Ultra contributed substantially to destruction of 76,875 Luftwaffe aircraft. The year 1943 represented peak Ultra effectiveness in the submarine war, with 237 U-boats lost, the overwhelming majority because of decoded intelligence guiding Allied countermeasures. Yet astonishingly, German security investigations failed repeatedly to uncover the catastrophe occurring before their eyes. 15 or more major security reviews occurred between 1941 and 1945, each somehow missing the forest for the trees. German naval intelligence launched 3 separate attempts to break their own Enigma systems, desperately hoping to validate security measures. All 3 investigations failed to achieve their objective. 5 distinct alternative theories captured German attention. Perhaps radar technology accounted for Allied success, or infrared detection, or advanced direction-finding capabilities, or infiltrated spy networks, or even traitors within command structures. Yet 0 investigations seriously entertained the most obvious possibility: Enigma compromise itself. A warning arrived from Swiss intelligence in August 1943, explicitly cautioning about security vulnerabilities. German leadership simply dismissed it. Suspicions bubbled up repeatedly among various command echelons, only to be suppressed at each level. The psychological barriers to accepting reality proved simply too formidable. After the war's conclusion, the consequences of concealment multiplied. 30 years of absolute secrecy persisted from 1945 through 1974. More than 10,000 Bletchley Park personnel maintained their silence faithfully. Hundreds of historical accounts required systematic revision once the truth emerged. Official historians eventually calculated the war's duration had been shortened by somewhere between 2 and 4 years through Ultra's contribution. Thousands upon thousands of German veterans experienced spiritual devastation as they suddenly understood the true nature of operations they had participated in, comprehending that they had labored unknowingly under the eyes of watching enemies. The German story of Enigma blindness carries warnings applicable across the centuries and across all domains of human knowledge and security. It demonstrates how thoroughly competent, intelligent professionals can overlook glaringly evident truths whenever institutional systems reinforce comfortable deceptions. Contemporary intelligence agencies have incorporated this historical episode into their foundational teaching materials. The American National Security Agency includes Enigma in training curricula addressing cognitive bias and the fragility of security assumptions. British intelligence services employ the case to underscore the necessity of perpetually challenging fundamental premises that seem beyond questioning. Military academies spanning continents examine it as the preeminent illustration of catastrophic intelligence failure despite overwhelming contradictory evidence. The German failure wasn't fundamentally technological. Their cryptographic mathematics remained sound and sophisticated. It wasn't procedurally inadequate. Their security protocols were intricate, generally well executed, and thoughtfully implemented. It wasn't an intellectual deficit. German cryptanalysts ranked among humanity's finest mathematical minds. The failure was profoundly psychological and institutional, the incapacity to interrogate basic assumptions despite mounting proof of their invalidity. In contemporary existence, populated by cyber warfare threats and omnipresent electronic surveillance capabilities, the Enigma narrative assumes heightened contemporary relevance. Every system deemed secure harbors potential vulnerabilities. Every private communication might reach unexpected audiences. Every encryption believed impenetrable warrants skepticism, informed by the reality that somewhere, somebody might very well be perusing contents intended for secrecy alone. German confidence in Enigma's invulnerability claimed thousands of lives and protracted warfare unnecessarily. Equivalent confidence in modern systems could generate consequences equally catastrophic. Today, Bletchley Park survives as a museum memorializing simultaneously the greatest intelligence triumph and Germany's most profound intelligence catastrophe in recorded history. The rooms where youthful minds cracked supposedly unbreakable ciphers remain preserved. Reconstructed bomb machines occupy their original spaces. The previously concealed narrative now stands openly revealed following decades of enforced silence. Visitors traverse the spaces where mathematical brilliance merged with industrial discipline to accomplish something German specialists deemed impossible. They observe the restricted quarters where thousands labored perpetually under conditions of absolute secrecy, wielding war-deciding intelligence they couldn't disclose to anyone, not colleagues, not friends, not family members across all those years. They comprehend how an eccentric assemblage of mathematicians, language experts, chess champions, and crossword puzzle devotees transformed cryptanalysis into industrial-scale operation, permanently transforming military conflict. Perhaps most profoundly moving remains the exhibit's simplest component. A captured four-rotor naval Enigma machine extracted from U-505 functions in full working order. Museum visitors can personally encode messages, witnessing rotors spinning and watching lights illuminate across the display panel. They experience directly that same mechanical precision that had convinced German cryptographers of absolute security. They grasp concretely how something so technically intricate, so mathematically elaborate, so meticulously guarded could nonetheless succumb to persistent adversaries equipped with adequate determination, sufficient resources, and sufficient imagination. The machine stands as memorial to an elementary yet profound principle. Whether examining intelligence, warfare, or fundamental human existence, the greatest peril originates not from ignorance itself, but from mistaken certainty, from possessing unfounded confidence regarding truths that subsequently prove illusory. The Germans were absolutely certain Enigma remained secure. That certainty, surpassing any Allied military advantage or strategic superiority, sealed their fate. Visitors departing Bletchley Park leave their reflections in the guest book, thousands of entries accumulating across the decades. One particular entry, inscribed in meticulous German script during 1995, carries particular weight. It reads, "My grandfather held command of U-604, perished with his entire crew during August 1943. For 50 years, I accepted that he died confronting overwhelming Allied technological superiority. Today I understand he perished because soldiers under his command received orders that enemies already comprehended." The genuine tragedy isn't that Germany surrendered, but that we never grasped we had already capitulated. The signature appears modest, simply identifying the author as a German grandson, finally achieving comprehension. The heroes inhabiting Bletchley Park earned their place within history's pantheon. Yet the Enigma lesson deserves equally permanent residence in our collective consciousness. It teaches about certainty's fragility, about how organizational systems generate blindness, about the price extracted when we refuse questioning our most fundamental convictions. In matters of intelligence, in conflict, and throughout existence, our gravest adversary typically represents ourselves. Specifically, our unexamined certainty regarding what we believe ourselves to comprehend. The 30,000 German submariners resting eternally beneath Atlantic depths. The countless Luftwaffe pilots plummeting from skies where anticipating enemies awaited. The Wehrmacht troops executing battles orchestrated by adversaries reading their operational orders before implementation. All perished not exclusively from warfare's brutality, but from intelligence failure so comprehensive, so total, that those most requiring knowledge remained forever ignorant. Ultra's secrecy endured 30 years following war's cessation. But that greater secret, how unexamined German certainty regarding communication security blinded them to manifest compromise, retains relevance whenever nations conceal information and presume their messages remain private. The Enigma device, once symbolizing German cryptographic excellence and technical innovation, now represents history's most cautionary monument, warning against absolute certainty within an inherently uncertain universe. The Germans remained uninformed. That ignorance, preserved despite mounting evidence suggesting otherwise, constitutes one of warfare's most momentous intelligence failures. Ultimately, the Allies accomplished something beyond merely decrypting Enigma. They sustained such rigorous operational security that adversaries never grasped their thoughts lay exposed like open books. That accomplishment, maintained through steadfast silence, extending across thousands of individuals and intricate deception coordination, probably represents the greatest single intelligence victory throughout military history's entire span. The account returns full circle to an aging admiral in 1974, contemplating a newly published book that revealed truths fundamentally transforming his comprehension of defeat. Dönitz's stunned silence that afternoon extended beyond simple grief regarding lost submariners or regret about a doomed conflict decided when Enigma was broken. That silence represented recognition itself. Recognition that certainty itself had functioned as the true adversary, that throughout conflict as throughout life, The unknowns we fail to recognize can prove far more destructive than dangers we can plainly perceive and directly confront.